Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solar Games, and today we're going to talk a little bit, make a short video about card quality. Just this general kind of understanding of what the differences are. And these are pretty subtle, I will say, and for most players, maybe it doesn't matter at all. But for me, it does matter, and for a lot of people who do care about this kind of stuff, it matters a lot. And I do want to show you kind of just what the differences across the board is, and what you're kind of expecting or not expecting, right? So let's start by talking about print runs. So some of you might know that Wizards, when they print Magic cards, they don't print from the same printers for the entire run. So for example, if for the last set that was released, Innistrad Crimson Vow, the first set of printing actually was done in Japan. The second set and onwards from there will be done in the US. And so you can tell because on the back of boxes, it will say made in Japan, made in US, etc. So for example, for Innistrad, the set boosters originally are from, were actually from Japan. And the draft boosters, well, that's actually not true. For Innistrad, I think the draft boosters, a good portion, were also from Japan. And the set boosters this time actually were from America. Anyways, it varies every set. But if you talk to most players will tell you they enjoy the cards from Japan printers more than they enjoy the cards from the US printers. Now, there are very subtle differences, but the touch and feel of the card is different. The coloring, those kind of things are different. And that's not the same as what we'll talk about a little bit later with what I would say the really bad print run, like no quality control era of Wizards of the Coast. But first, let's go through some of the things. So the first thing let's talk about is the differences between Japan and US printers. So we'll put this on the side and I'll show you. So this became a big deal or big actual difference for the Innistrad Midnight Hunt and Innistrad Crimson Vow cards. So the first thing that most players know is the back of the card. So on the back of the cards for the US printers, these cards feel kind of ashy, a little bit rough. My friend described it to me. I think it was very apt. He says, it's like when I touch the US cards, it makes it feel like my hand's already dirty, right? Whereas the Japan cards are very smooth. These backs are just really nice and gloss. And like if you visually tell, you can't really visually tell the difference. I mean, maybe the one is a little bit more glossy than the other one, but they basically look the same. But if you touch the back, they do feel very different, okay? That's number one. But normally that's not a big deal because you put it in the sleeve, who's gonna care? You're never gonna feel the actual card anyways. The second biggest difference that we have to talk about is what actually happened with the printer. So when these cards, these are the full art lands from Innistrad, kind of new and unique and people really like them, were printed, I think it was intentional that they wanted to make the lands really pop. And what do they mean by that? So I think Swamp's a bad example. I'll start with Mountain, it's gonna be easier to see. So if you look at the top of this mountain, right? So look at this mountain here is the US print. Actually, we'll do one in each hand kind of thing, right? So there's a US print on the right and then the Japan print on the left. Do you see any differences when I kind of show you the borders, when I like shine it in the light? Yeah. So you probably can see it already. You see how the bottom mana symbol pops when the light shines on it and how the Japan one pops and the US one does not? It's not just that it's visually using a different ink to ink the border. It actually has an embossed edge. You can feel this like mana symbol here. It's really nice. It does make the card feel a lot more vivid, I think, than this US print run. Now, normally there are also color differences between the runs, but I will say as far as like the actual image themselves, maybe it's because it's in black and white, they both look fine. They actually look almost identical color-wise. But this bordering is all the difference. And maybe people don't care about it, but some people really will care about this border. And that's one of the biggest differences between the Japan print and the US print for this set. So let's take, for example, now we'll look at the forest, right? So same thing. Kind of see, I'm gonna show you up in light. Do you see the difference between the two? Maybe actually next to each other is better like this. You see that mana symbol, how it pops, and you see this mana symbol does not, right? And that's one of the other differences between the two. And same thing for the swamp, which I'm gonna be honest, because the swamp is such a dark color, it actually matters more that this mana symbol pops more than the other one. As you can see, the mana symbol really has that shine to it, it just looks great. So that's one of the differences. And also within the same set, I do want to show you these cards because I thought these were also very different. That makes a difference, actually. I guess I have both in here. Great. Okay, cool. So the showcase cards for Midnight Hunt, also had a similar border. So for the Japan print runs here, I think the side-by-side has been great. So we'll show you like this. Notice how the side-by-side, that legendary border comes out more. If you feel it, you can feel the ink. It is there, right? It's subtle, but it's there. And that whole entire border, including this little part where it circles the type line, it's all there, right? And that's this card, whereas the US print one is just very flat. Now, you might not care about this, or you might actually not want this, but regardless of which, these are the differences in the print run. And so you just understand when you're purchasing cards, if you care about these things, do make sure you tell the sellers, hey, I'm looking for this version, is this version, etc. Just really ask the question, because these, before it was mostly a color difference and maybe the back of the card feels different. Now we're getting into an era where it's almost like the way they print is different. And from what I can tell, the Japan printers are probably printing, because all Magic cards are printed in layers of ink, right? So that's why they have the dot pattern. If you're not familiar with dot pattern, look online, do a quick search for the dot pattern, you'll understand. But basically all Magic cards are printed in layers. So they will print, for example, like I don't know specifically how they do it, but something like all reds, all blacks, all greens. They will print all the colors in layers. And so that's why you sometimes have those misprint cards where it's like missing a layer. So the card looks weird, right? Like it's missing green layer, missing color layer, etc. But for example, the Japan layer, there looks like there is another extra layer on top, which is kind of like a gloss ink layer that was not applied on the US printers. Now, could that be technology differences? Could that just be honestly misinstructions? I have no clue. But the fact is the Japan ones have this popped feel and the US does not. That's just the truth. Okay, so let's talk about kind of like the really well-known terrible era of kind of like crappy printing from from Magic. So basically around, like this is what, Ravnica? Yeah. So 2012 era, they would have variations like this. So as an example, I'm feeling the back. These both feel very glossy on the back, so maybe they're both Japan printers, but honestly 2012 it could have been very different back then. But notice how the text here, one is much more crisp than the other, right? You can tell the difference when I show you this, right? You see? And that's not a fake card, that's a real Magic card. This one is thinner, this one's thicker. They feel the same, the colors are fine, it's just the text is thicker. And that's because there's some weird thing that happened with the printer where it kind of like double printed. Instead of printing a very thin line, it shifts a little bit to the right and it would have this effect where it's almost like it's a little bit like blurrier or thicker lines. And you can see that very prominently in, for example, this one from, this is Khans of Tarkir. Yeah, this is Khans, so look at these two cards. And you can tell right away that it's almost like, I mean, some people might call this a misprint, but you can see how the look at the teller, the words on top. It's almost like the words itself is covered in smoke, right? So very fitting for the card, but kind of crappy if you're buying this card and you didn't want this kind of print quality. Similarly, in this is I think Ravnica, Guilds of Ravnica. Yeah, okay, so 2013 Guilds of Ravnica, I think, or RTR. I don't remember. So you can see these two cards, right? Up close, look similar, but if I put them together like this, look at the text again, similar things happening. And especially the bottom here, the rules text for this card is so bad. It almost looks like somebody blurred the ink, right? And you can tell, like, for example, this is so blurry versus this is so clean. All genuine cards. So the reason I keep these in my box is so I can just say, hey, by the way, I know back then during these eras, they had some issues with like print quality. So you could totally have a genuine card, but it's just gonna look like it's a fake card because it looks lower quality. And yeah, that's sad. So that's card quality. Recently, I have not seen this as commonly as back then. So I guess they probably fixed the quality between those two sets. That's my guess. Lastly, let's talk about foiling. So this is probably the thing that everyone really is, it riles other people up, right? So Wizard now has a very bad reputation about their foils. I mean, I think actually most card games, even Pokemon in the original days had this problem. Now, I will say some of the first set of foils, like Urza's, I did notice that the Urza foils don't bend as much as they do now. So there must have been some changes between then and now, right? So just looking at these cards here, and these, I didn't even try to pick the worst ones. If you watch my other videos, you can see the really bad ones. But like these two cards, you can see there's a big like gap in between, right? So that's what happens when you have, here we go, let's see if I can get a focus. Yeah, look at that gap. That's what happens when you have bendy foils. And this happens because of basically moisture. So if you have moisture, because the material that's printed on the front is not the same as the back, what you end up having is this this kind of like bend. And these aren't, honestly, these aren't even too bad. There's really, really, really bad ones of this. And for example, this one bends inward this way, so you can see they bend this way. Some other cards, like if you recently watched me open up the Kamigawa ink, they bend outward like this, so they bend this way, right? So there's that too. And then one of the things that I noticed is these double face cards here, that's kind of new in the Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, they don't bend. Why? Because they're printed both sides foil. So what ends up happening is they are pretty much like, here, I'll hold it like this, you can see. They're gonna be the same material on both sides, which means they're not really gonna bend. And that's the cool thing. That's one of the nice things about the foils in the double face. So if you're buying foils and you don't want the bending, right? Or if you're buying cards and you don't want the bending, because the foil prices nowadays have actually softened a little bit, I would say buy the double face foils. They're not gonna bend. They're gonna look great and they're not gonna bend. And now foiling usually means it's a darker picture as well than the non-foil version. So do take that into account. But as far as bending goes, if you buy a double face card, these or the lands from Zendikar or yeah, so all the modal DFCs, those kind of the pathway lands from Zendikar and Kaldheim aren't going to bend. But anyways, all of the double-sided so are going to bend. Now, the reason why I have some Flesh and Blood, you guys probably saw that earlier, cards on my desk is because I do want to show you what the difference in card quality. And so if you never heard about Flesh and Blood or played the game or anything like that, hopefully if you heard anything, you're going to hear the one thing that a lot of people do say, which is the card quality of Flesh and Blood is amazingly good. And yes, I would agree 100%. These cards just look so vivid. I mean, all of them look they pop out. The colors are nice. The best part is just given a new game with new printers and everything, they figure out how to print foils without bending them. And no, I don't mean cold foils. I know everyone's going to say, oh, no, you're talking about cold foils. I'm not talking about cold foils. I'm talking about these rainbow foils, which is the same thing as, you know, your cards from Magic. Now, I think the difference is, and the reason how this works is because when they do foiling here for Flesh and Blood, they don't foil the whole card. Now, that's going to be a little bit more expensive per card to make, right? Because you have to be a little precise. You're not just putting a layer of this foil layer on top. But it does give the really nice benefit that these cards don't bend. Here we go. There might be a little bit of bending, but you can see, here, I'll get that in focus for you. You can see a little bit of bending, but overall, very flat and very straight, right? Now, the first, and this came from my first edition Welcome to the Wraith box when I opened this like maybe a year and a half ago. And it's just been in a sleeve, in a box here for a long time. And so I noticed that the first set did have a kind of like top to bottom curl, kind of like this, but it's very slight. It's there, but it's very slight. This is from the latest set, Tales of Aria, and you can see this has no bend on this card. And this just, I actually just left this out in like, you know, normal air, and it did not bend. Yeah, so, and this is not a double face card, right? So just the normal face on the back, and this kind of face. Yeah, so I think what I'm trying to say, I guess, is I think Wizards can do so much more to get their card quality up, because I can see from another game that they can do it. So if you telling me you can't make foils that don't bend, it's a lie. I think part of it is you don't want to spend the money to go and print maybe foiling only on part of the card. I mean, if you look at the difference between this land and this card, the difference is Wizard just foils the whole thing. I mean, including the edges, right? So even the side of the card, like where the text are, these are foiled. So this entire front is foil. It's probably really cheap to do that versus saying, okay, make the mana symbol foiled, maybe make this set symbol foiled, make the ghosts, the spirits, the kami on the card foiled. That's probably going to cost a lot more money than just doing part of the cards. And I'm going to be honest, it doesn't matter for gameplay most of the time, but it does matter long term for a game to say, hey, look, I can't make these cards, and these aren't cheap, right? So the Kamigawa Ink ones are like, what I paid $30 plus tax plus shipping for 5 cards, right? And they can't make 5 cards that don't bend, and these just come out of booster boxes and they don't bend, right? Yeah, that's the difference, and this is a big deal that I think Wizards should take some effort or make some effort to go fix. Because long term, I mean, people are going to care about this. The fact that the secondary market for foils is lower than the regular frame, I mean, that should be a good indicator to tell you, Wizards, you're kind of screwing up, right? The foils are supposed to be the unique, the special cards. Nobody wants those. They just want the normal frames. What is that saying about your foils? Anyways, that's Mark from Solar Games. I hope you learned something about foiling and card quality today. Hopefully this also helps you with some of the, like, you know, if you're looking at buying collections, spotting fakes, etc. Yeah, hopefully you also just, you know, learned something or had fun on the channel. That's good too, right? So anyways, Mark, Solar Games, I will see you next time. Thanks.